One important mindset we need to change is that nature is not natural resources. It's not something out there that we have to manage and even optimize. We are rather part of nature.
In this episode, our guest is Thomas Legrand. He is the lead advisor for the Conscious Food Systems Alliance, convened by the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP. Together with partnering organizations, which include the Inner Green Deal, he focuses on the role of inner development to support the ecological and social transition of the food and agricultural sector. We spoke to him about the importance of community building, his recent book, The Politics of Being, and the need for courage at this point in history. My name is Jeroen Jans, and welcome to the Inner Green Deal podcast. As I mentioned in my introduction, Thomas, you're the lead advisor for the Conscious Food Systems Alliance. What exactly does that entail?
We have a team focusing on the role of inner development to support the ecological and social transition of the food and agriculture sector. At the heart of this work is building a community for like-minded people that want to support this agenda and that want to support each other. We also open the space for more personal connection. This has been very nourishing for me, building that community, building a space where they can express their insights in relation to that vision of the role of inner development. Sometimes there is no space for that for them, and they feel alone. To also hear from people their gratitude for building that community. I think that's what's most dear to me in that work. Living in these times comes with a very important responsibility for future generations. So that calls for courage. Sometimes it's not easy to make some professional decisions, but I think it's now time to stand up. And in the next decades, when we look back at this time, everyone will have to ask himself or herself, what have I contributed? What is my responsibility on where we are now?
Can you share an example of community building in the work you do?
We try to open the space for diversity. One of the members that has been very engaged, for example, is someone from Cameroon. I remember him once offering the kind of centering exercise we do to open our meetings. I remember him showing a branch of a tree with flowers on it and inviting in his own tradition all into the space. An initiative convened by UNDP with lots of people from more traditional large organizations. Making space for that, I find it really beautiful. I think having indigenous representatives, making the space for them to create a sacred space in their own language with their own traditions is so uncommon in the work we generally do with the UN and the work we do with companies. But we feel like people were very respectful and receptive to it and really enjoyed it. We are now ready for more and more welcoming this diversity and welcoming these ancestral cultures and connections to the land. I think that is very important for future to recognize in particular the indigenous, traditional wisdoms and how much they have to bring to make our conversations deeper and more meaningful.
Gratitude and community are clearly very important to you. Have you always felt that way?
I was born in France and I feel very connected to a place which is in Normandy, 2 hours drive from Paris, where my family has a house, and I was able as a child to go often over the weekend, climbing on trees and etc. I noticed that especially when I started to live abroad and starting to reconnect very deeply with the earth, I really started to feel a deep connection to that place where I'm really grateful for that place and all the nice memory it has brought to me. I remember when I was a late teenager, one of these mornings when I was getting up to go to the university, I was feeling down, and I remember that I was in the first floor of this apartment in Paris. I stopped and I got an insight. It was really clear in that moment that if I would align myself with what the universe wants, I would be sustained. Because of how my journey unfolds later and what happened in Mexico, I now see that moment as an important, very clear insight. I have a lot of gratitude for many conditions I have in my life at the moment, whether it is my wife, my family, my two daughters, the place where I live, the community nearby, the work I have in the Conscious Food Systems Alliance, and this book, Politics of Being. I just feel I'm really blessed.
You mentioned Mexico as part of your journey. Did something particular happen there?
Some 20 years ago, I was visiting an indigenous community, very remote community in central Mexico. I was walking alone in that land, and there was very beautiful panoramas. I remember that it felt very silent. There was a little bit of wind. And as I was staring to the other side of the canyon, there was a conifer forest on the other side. I was staring at it. It was as if I was there, as if I was in the forest. I would say even more like the forest was in me. I could feel it inside of me somehow. That was a deep experience. When I decided I wanted to contribute, it was so natural for me to work on forest conservation. After a few months when I come back from Mexico, I took some extra courses to be able to have a major in international development. And then later on, I did a PhD in ecological economics because that's where I wanted to contribute. I could recognize later on that there was a very special connection with forests, and I really feel at home when I walk in a forest. The encounters I had in Mexico brought to me a deep reconnection to myself and to the earth, and seeing also the clear path that I could follow on. I remember one day in a ceremony with shaman, me asking questions, and for the first time seeing that path. I immediately recognized that was what I had always looked for without able to putting a name on it. I decided I would make this the priority in my own life. They call it a path with heart. I did not know at that time what it would entail. Even if I'm dedicating myself to that, it's now very clear that following this calling was the best thing I could have done. My purpose, I would say, is to support the cultural evolution of humanity that wants to happen.
Mexico was clearly a very important place for you. Has spirituality remained a part of your life since then?
I met my wife in Costa Rica in 2009. The first day we met, as I was coming from France, she told me there is a place she'd like to visit there. It was called Plum Village. Before we went to Plum Village 5 years later, I did note in my diary that I could feel something important was waiting for us there. When I was driving to Plum Village, I remember exactly that sensation. The first retreat we did with my wife was in July 2014, and we could feel we were going to something important. This first week of retreat in Plum Village was remarkable. It was in July, and it's a time where families come, lots of children, lots of activities, but at the same time, a lot of compassion, mindfulness. We left that retreat with the idea that this may be the place we were looking for. We came back in September and we said, okay, it's here and it's now.
And you still live there, so it must have been the right choice for you.
When I look back, I definitely feel the practice here is really medicine for my soul. Some deep things I've been able to recognize within me, and especially the emphasis on joy and ease of Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching has been very important for me. Every day I try to spend some time in nature, often doing some kind of walking meditation in the forest where I live nearby, which is a way for me to reconnect.
In 2021, your book Politics of Being was published. Can you talk a little bit about the book and its story?
Politics of Being, Wisdom and Science for a New Development Paradigm really makes the case of putting being at the center of our societies rather than an economic growth. This book started with my own conscious journey. When I connected to my spiritual path in Mexico, there was a link between individual consciousness and how we collectively create reality and the problems we see in the world. Often people think about this need for a change of consciousness through a bottom-up approach, like it's an individual process and that somehow these individual changes change societies. At some point, as I was working on policies, I started to think about, okay, how can we design systems that support this evolution, that water the best seeds in everyone rather than competition, selfishness, scarcity, as many institutions do. To me, it seems like the most important insight we should focus on. And I was wondering, what does that mean and how we can build institutions in all the sectors of societies that are supporting this vision. 10 years ago, I had the vision of this book, which at the beginning was a vision of a collective book. So I would kind of frame the concept of politics of being, and experts from different fields with their own spiritual traditions would say what this meant in their own fields. Maybe because I was, young and unknown, I was not so successful in terms of bringing the right people into this book project. It took me a couple of years, but after that, I decided I would write this book myself. What sustained me was really the conviction that I often told my wife, I don't know why no one has yet written that book. It's based on this sentence from the Earth Charter, which was a very important document many years ago. When basic needs have been met, development is primarily about being more rather than having more. It's an incredible journey, starting alone with not much and seeing, all the blessings that has come. I had this beautiful foreword from Mathieu Ricard, a lot of thought leaders that are supporting it. Now I have some publishers in France that will publish it.
You mentioned that quote just now from the Earth Charter. When basic needs have been met, development is primarily about being more rather than having more. So how do you think we translate this point into climate action?
One important mindset we need to change is that nature is not natural resources. It's not something out there that we have to manage and even optimize. We are rather part of nature. We are animals. The life in us is the same than the life in the trees, in the animals, or even at some deeper level, maybe in the rocks, we could say. So we are really part of that. We are not trying to save nature. We are rather trying to save ourselves by finding our place within nature and a way to live in harmony in that large ecosystems we are part of. So we are nature defending itself. I think we need to design even governance systems that reflect that. Then indigenous people and scientists would have an important role to play in terms of representing nature and also recognizing nature's rights, with which we need to find a balance. We're not only human beings on this earth, and every being has the right to be. So what do we really need ourselves to be well, and not more than that, so that also other beings on this earth can be well also.
Is there anything you might like to offer for people listening who are perhaps looking for a starting point to explore their calling or find a way to act?
The first thing is to be able to hear and respond to our inner voice or to our heart's calling. And in my experience, these callings becomes clearer as you walk this path. Sometimes we have some fears at the beginning to make one move, but we have to recognize the importance of really responding to our inner calling. This inner calling is what fulfills us, and at the same time is what can create the more beautiful world our heart knows is possible. The good news is that we can reconcile human flourishing and living in harmony with one another and nature. When we walk the path that is right for us, and if we have enough determination, patience, the right conditions manifest for what needs to happen. And that makes our life really meaningful because we are in touch with something that is deeper, bigger than us. Making space for being who we really are, especially in these social settings in which we work and interact, making space for our sensitivity and our vulnerability, and to be able to speak the language of our heart, that is to be being courageous. And being courageous sometimes is also to be able to respond to the call. Being courageous is also being authentic. I don't think we can make the transition, the ecological, or social, or even political transition. I don't think we can make that outer transition without this inner transition. What I like to share from my own experience is the importance to believe in one's inner voice that can guide us to places, including inner places that we may not know, but trust the process and trust also that in this process we can reconcile human flourishing with a sense of service and benefits for all.
Courage, service, and community are big themes that came up during this conversation. Each is a reminder that we need to be connected and work together if we are to make more progress. We'll be back next time with the final episode of this season, the In a Green Deal podcast. We'll be talking to Jamie Bristow, one of the authors of the leading report on the role of mindfulness in addressing the climate crisis, and also former director of the Mindfulness Initiative, which led him to work on mindfulness training with politicians in the British Parliament. We hope you will join us to listen to his many insights. And if you enjoyed this episode, there are many others in our archive, and perhaps you might consider sharing and subscribing to the In a Green Deal podcast or leaving a review. For now, we thank you for listening and look forward to you joining us again very soon.